Dr. Sweatt.
Yes. All right. Good morning. Can y'all hear me? Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yes. Thank you for the introduction.
You're welcome.
I'm going to talk about this field that's very fascinating. There's a nascent area of gastroenterology, which has been brought about largely by things that have been happening in our society, causing what we're going to talk about today, leaky gut. So for the gastroenterologist, the most important part of the body is the digestive tract. So, you know, for the brain doctor, it's the brain. For the heart doctor, some people it's the heart. But for us, you are what you eat. There was on a recent trip to Peru, there's a naturopathic doctor who's very famous named Dr. Carlos Casanova. And he always told his patients that death begins in the gut. Why would he say that? Well, today we're starting to find out. It appears that through the entity called leaky gut, that we're finding that the systems, all the other systems of the body are connected. As a matter of fact, they call the gut the second brain. It's something you might know, because the second largest deposit of neurologic tissue is in the gut. So how does all this work together? Well, leaky gut is something that's been, it was sort of a misnomer for a number of years in my field. But because of what's been happening over the past 30 years, well, there's an increased incidence of people who have things like sensitivity to grains. As many of you go, a lot of people are switching to a celiac diet these days, where they avoid grains at all. And the question is why? So it appears that this could be due to GMOs, genetically modified foods, pesticides, and other contaminants in the system like detergents. And this leads to leaky gut. We've known for years other entities cause leaky gut like cholera, giardia, inflammatory bowel disease. It causes you to leak proteins, enzymes, nutrients, minerals into the GI tract out of your body. This leads to problems like diarrhea, iron deficiency anemia, a number of problems that lead to problems in the gut. But what we're finding now is that there's a talk or a communication between the gut and the rest of your body. We call this symbiosis, in that the bacteria of your gut can talk to the other parts of your body. So we knew 30 years ago that we needed the gut or the bacteria in the gut to make things that we couldn't make ourselves. One of those was vitamin K. We can't make vitamin K ourselves. It's made by the bacteria in our gut. So if you don't have vitamin K, if you cut yourself, you could bleed to death. So we know that we need these bacteria. And so there's something called a symbiotic relationship. These organisms that are not us, they're totally separate organisms, but they live within us. It's a symbiotic relationship. It's much like in, I guess some people would say like Star Trek, the Borg, you know, where you become part of this system. It's sort of like what Elon Musk is talking about now, where we're going to become part of this artificial intelligence. Well, it just so happens that the symbiotic relationship is much more complex than we all thought in the past. It's not just vitamin K, but it's a number of things. So as a matter of fact, there's more bacteria, or these symbiotes, in our GI tract than there are cells in our body. The bacteria in the gut outnumber the cells in our body about 10 to 1. So there's trillions and trillions of these bacteria. They estimate that a third of your stool weight is nothing but bacteria, which sounds incredible, I know, but that's a fact. So in a normal adult, that's about 200 pounds. That's about 2 to 3 pounds of the fecal waste is nothing but bacteria. Oh, by the way, you guys can ask questions along the way if you like. So just sort of chime in. So I'm going to go over how we know today, from my notes here, how this all happens. So there's something called symbiosis, where everything works together, where we're symbiotic related, where they're benefiting us and we're benefiting them. We're giving them a home, and they're giving us the products that we need. you have a question? But there's also, as opposed to symbiosis, there's something called dysbiosis, where things go wrong. And this leads to the entity called leaky gut. So we know that this signaling pathway, or this talk, which communicates to the other parts of the body, occurs by certain products that the bacteria make, also through the neurologic system, where the bacteria can actually communicate with the brain and other parts of the body, also through the endocrine hormone system of the body, where they can signal through hormones and enzymes that are made or reciprocally come back to it. And so we know that this crosstalk occurs with the neurologic system, the immune system, the endocrine metabolic system, the gut wall and the integrity of the gut wall, which is specifically leaky gut, also the hematologic system. So to give you some recent data on that, in the neurologic system, it reports that if one eats good nutritional food, the gut microbes signal the brain to eat the same thing. So what we're finding is if you eat good food, the microbes will multiply and they'll send a signal to the brain to eat more of them. If you eat junky or bad food or fast food, that the microbes that eat those bacteria, eat those products, will signal your brain to eat more of them. So the gut bacteria are actually telling us what to do. There's also alterations in the gut microbiome that are implicated in the development of psychiatric disorders such as anxiety, depression, attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity disorder, Alzheimer's disease, autism, Parkinson's disease, and multiple sclerosis. So there was a recent paper that came out that showed that if you took bifidus as well as lactobacillus and treated those patients that had depression with that the depression was improved. So it shows a significant relationship between the gut and the brain. New data also suggests that recoveries from stroke can be enhanced by optimal gut microbiome. And also, although the presence of a gut-brain communication axis has long been established, recent studies argue that the development and regulation of the axis is dictated by the gut microbiome. And this is from a leading researcher in the field. In fact, now, this is so important and eye-opening to us in medicine that a number of medical schools now are dedicating an entire department and open up new centers on gut microbiome research. All right. Oh, so that's the neurologic system. The immune system. So dysbiosis can alter the immune tonus, rendering the host prone to exogenous and endogenous infections, breaking down the tolerance to self-components and activating the immune responses in an excessive way. So you get chronic inflammation. So an example of that would be is if you had too many detergents. So I was prone to this myself, and I actually corrected that. But if you use a lot of industrial strength detergents, it'll be like Dawn soap on your foods, and you eat with that, there's a possibility that you can break down the mucolytic barrier between your gut and the microbiome in your GI tract. So in a disorder like lymphocytic colitis or microscopic colitis, we know it's just a reaction of the body to a normal component of your microbiome. But the body gets inflamed and can't turn off the inflammatory switch. So you stay in a constant state of inflammation, which leads people to have constant diarrhea. That could be from this disorder of the immune system or this barrier. Probiotics have been shown to enhance and modulate the immune response, like lactobacillus, Saccharomyces bordetellii, for Clostridium difficile. There's VSL3 we use for pediatric Crohn's disease. We know that Align probiotics, which is a specific one, can actually decrease bloating in patients. If we move on to the endocrine metabolic system, there's emerging evidence supporting the role of gut microbiome in mediating the interaction between the host and the environment by extracting energy from food otherwise indigestible by the host and producing metabolites and cytokines that affect the host's metabolism. One mechanism for weight modulation. So we know now that if you transplant the gut microbiome from obese person and place it into a skinny person, that skinny person becomes obese. Or if you take the microbiome from a skinny person and transplant it into an obese person, you can turn the obese person becomes skinny. So we know that these gut microbes are talking to us and telling us what to do, actually modulating weight in that case. The gut microbiota also affect the host metabolism of obesity through several pathways, such as bile salts and subsequent changes in metabolic signaling. Also, we know that certain microbes produce much more methane, which actually slows gut motility. So if you have a problem with constipation, an excessive amount of gut microbes that produce methane will cause you to be constipated. Whereas if you have gut microbes that produce sulfur, they will cause diarrhea. So if you're having constipation, you want to use supplements or to alter the microbiome to replace the methane producing bacteria that slow you down with more sulfur producing bacteria. And the opposite for people that have diarrhea, you would want to get more methane producing bacteria and try to get an optimum level. But when you look at people who have chronic constipation, a lot of them have excessive amounts of methane producing bacteria. So we have to alter that, and we can do that by a number of ways, such as probiotics or antibiotics in some cases. Another aspect it talks to is the gut wall and intestinal permeability, which speaks directly to what we're talking about today, which is leaky gut. And several recent reports have shown that probiotics can reverse the leaky gut by enhancing the production of tight junction proteins. These are the proteins that keep your cells together. So when there's an insult to the bowel, such as an infection or certain chemicals like pesticides or detergents, whatever, that cause an irritation to the gut lining, like if you go to a picnic and you get food poisoning, well, there's an aberration in the gut wall, and these junctions between cells become loose, and then the contents of the body can leak out into the gut, cause diarrhea, cause dehydration, cause a number of different disorders like loss of proteins, minerals, enzymes. And other studies have shown that natural sources of probiotics are much better. So if you want to repair this gut wall integrity and restore the microbiome to what it was pre-insult, the best source of this is really not the supplements per se, it's really the foods that we eat. So the best way to do this is to get the organic fruits and vegetables and use those. Even better than that is the fruit that it's the produce that you grow in your own yard, or if you know local farmers, they still have a lot of the minerals like vitamin B12 and a lot of the bacteria that are still on the plants that haven't been washed off or irradiated or other things that kill these beneficial bacteria. And that's how we replenish our gut microbiome naturally. Also, the intestine is protected from its own microbiota. So in the story of like lymphocytic colitis, like I was just telling you, once that wall is breaking down, then you can react against your own natural microbes and cause a disease like lymphocytic colitis. But the bile is protected by this lattice, this multi-layer mucus structures. It's like a callus, it's like an ice castle. If you see the little movies, you look at the ice castles, it's like a little structure in time like this. And if above it is the bacteria and below it is your intestinal wall down here. And so you have this barrier that protects yourself against these symbiotes that we have that can actually cause disease if this barrier doesn't exist. Another example is H. pylori, as many of you guys know, that can cause things like ulcers, gastritis, duodenitis. It can also cause cancer in the GI tract. But we're protected by this barrier of mucus. And sometimes that barrier is taken down if we have too much acid in our system, or if we do things that cause us to have more acid, like too much caffeine in our diet, tobacco leads to excessive acid and break down to this mucus wall. Detergents can emulsify that and break down this wall that we have, and that can lead to the leaky gut and breakdown. So we have to keep that mucus layer up. Also, the oral microbiome alterations are predictive of various diseases. So just the microbiome in our own mouths is a benefit to us. There's a diverse array of oral and systematic diseases associated with this oral microbiome, including but not limited to cavities, periodontal diseases, oral cancer, colorectal cancer, pancreatic cancer, and even irritable bowel syndrome. So digestion begins in the mouth. And if we chew our food well, we tend to do a lot better. I know a lot of us are prone to that. I tell my patients all the time, especially a lot of the dyspeptics, sometimes people come in and they just have all this gas and bloating and can't do any better. And they can't get better. And if they just chew their food much better, they seem to do much better. So instead of 2 bites, I tell them 10 bites. And so in one way I say, eat like a Frenchman, in that you want to savor every bite. And you want to swish it around your mouth and make it a puree, a pate in your mouth before you swallow. This aids in the digestive process and helps a lot of people that are dyspeptics. But the GI tract, back to leaky gut. So this leaky gut can affect the whole body for multiple reasons. As I told you, it can lead to a number of the different systems: neurologic system, immune system, cardiologic system, renal system, all the different systems. These gut microbes are very important. We're finding out more and more. We know that in the future, as we do more research, that it's going to be even more eye-opening as to how we are interrelated with these bacteria that are traveling along with us during life. So the question arises, how do we protect ourselves or prevent a lot of the diseases that lead to the leaky gut that causes so many issues for us? So the number one thing that we need to do, which is really turning the field of gastroenterology and internal medicine on its head, is that the GI tract needs rest. So it used to be thought that we could eat like multiple meals per day. There was a thought in medicine that, or leads to controversy as to whether you should eat 2 or 3 meals a day or multiple meals. I'm sure many of you have heard about that. At least in the past, people talk about eating many meals a day, little small meals, to help people that were dyspeptic or having problems with the GI tract. What we're finding out now is what we as Adventists have known all along, and that is that your GI tract needs rest. So I was listening to a number of professors, well, it's actually 2 professors from Harvard and Stanford recently talk about this, and they said all the data coming out now is turning our understanding of the need for rest in the GI tract on its head. We used to think that we could tell people to eat 6 meals a day was better for them than eating 2 meals a day. But now these professors from Harvard and Stanford are telling us that the 2 meal a day program, which is what we know from the spirit of prophecy all along, is the best meal program that we have. Some of you guys have heard about, I'm sure most of you heard about intermittent fasting, but this is a totally different paradigm than we had 20, 30 years ago, where people didn't know exactly what we should be doing as far as the number of meals a day and how much we should be eating or when we should be eating. But what they're finding now is that the GI tract, to be in optimal health and to prevent things like leaky gut, which leads to other problems in our bodies, is a 2 meal a day is the best. And because we have a circadian rhythm, as you all know, the body wakes up in the morning. And when that happens, our cortisol goes up, heart rate goes up, a number of things start to happen, that the breakfast is the best time to eat that is in the morning. And then the second meal should be sometime between 5 and 6 hours later if you want to do a 2 meal a day program. Those who still want to do 3 meal a day, that's still acceptable, but they know that the benefit for health comes when the last meal of the day, from that time to the next meal the next day, is 12 hours apart. So some people will start at 8 o'clock at night and then do it and don't eat anything till after 8 o'clock the next morning. But as I told you, what they're finding is that they know that if you can shut down the last meal of the day earlier, it'll be much better. So 12 hours gives you a life benefit. You live much longer. But if you push it to 17 hours, which would give you what 17 minus 24 is that 7 hours. So that'd be 7 hours between your first meal and your last meal, that you get even a greater life benefit. You live much longer. We're finding out now the reason why that is because it gives you a time to do house cleaning. And what do I mean by that? They call it autophagy. which means that your body has a chance to get rid of the old cells. So if you don't get rid of your old cells, the old cells or the damaged cells in your bodies are the ones that malfunction and give you disease, which could be heart disease, could be cancer, it could be a number of different diseases. But if you have an old cell that you don't have time to replace because you're always busy digesting your food or working, that those cells lead to problems. And so we know that the cleaning mechanism is started or enhanced by this time, this rest that we have between the last meal of the day and the first meal of the next day. So rest is very important for the GI tract. It's much like, I give the analogy, if you have a company, let's say you have the GI tract is like the ocean. So you have a constant wave in your body. From the time you put food in your mouth, you swallow it, and then it goes on a conveyor belt, and you don't even have to think about what's happening really. But that food is constantly on a wave. And so we have waves like this that are pushing the food through your GI tract, through your esophagus, through your stomach, through your small bowel, through the colon. But then there's big waves that come and cleanse it. They call it an MMCs, or these big migratory complexes. And that is a cleansing wave that pushes it through. It's much like at the beach where you see waves coming through, and then you see a big wave that pushes it all through. Well, if you had a water park and you were running it 24/7 without time to do any maintenance on it, that water park's going to break down after a while. You know that if you don't give time for maintenance with any business that you have, that it breaks down. And it just so happens that the GI tract is the same way. If we don't have time to do that, we break down. And we know now from the research that's being done, it's because we don't have time to clean out the old parts or the old cells that were causing us problems. And so this fasting or this intermittent time where we give the GI tract rest, it tells the body, hey, you're fasting, and it sends a signal through these longevity genes. In aging research now, there's 15 longevity genes. And so they're called sirtuins, AMPK, and mTOR. And the signal that they get from the lack of energy, from when you're fasting, the lack of amino acids, tells the body it's time to clean and to get rid of these cells. And so that sends a signal. So if we're eating all the time, that's doing our bodies a disservice. So rest is very important. The next part of the way to protect yourself and to improve your chances of not having leaky gut, as I stated before, is chewing. So digestion begins in the mouth. We mix the food with the saliva. It also has digestive enzymes in there, like amylase lipase, and other enzymes in the mouth that help you start to digest the food. And when it gets to the stomach, it doesn't have to work as hard. And sometimes the cleansing wave has to come in and push these large particles. The stomach likes to micturate. In other words, it likes to it's like a washing machine, like shush, 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 and it's like mixing the food up really, really good and mixing it up with all the chemicals that the stomach makes, as well as what comes from the mouth before it goes into the small bowel, where we start to absorb all those nutrients. And if you don't do that well, then like some people, you can see the corn in your stool, or you can see the food that you ate still in your stool. Well, you didn't digest that food. It just went through as fiber, cellulose, and without any type of nutritive value to your body. So to get the most out of your food, you need to chew, but it also releases these nutrients so that they can be broken down by not only by our cells, but also by the bacteria, which sends these helpful metabolites that help us to chew, to remember to eat the right things, but also send healthy signals to the rest of our body, whether that's by the nervous system, the immune system, or the endocrinologic system. The next thing that's important to help us to keep a healthy leaky gut is this acid barrier. So the acid barrier is when you eat stuff. So whenever you eat things, like we eat the healthy vegetables and fruits from the produce section at the store, hopefully organic, or from our own gardens or people that we know. And you have to have a protection because sometimes you get pathogens, correct? Well, these pathogens are destroyed or halted from causing any problem in the GI tract by an acid barrier in the stomach. The acid level in the stomach is a pH of 2, which many of you know is pretty strong acid. It kills most bacteria that are not designed to survive that type of acidic environment. So it keeps a lot of the pathogens away, and a lot of the other possible toxins that we eat are disenabled by that acid environment. So the acid barrier is very important for us because we put a lot of things in our mouth. As you know, little kids put all sorts of things in their mouths, and that acid barrier is very important to protect them. The problem we run into sometimes is when we eat our food and drink, that we dilute that acid barrier. So if you have, I live in an area where there's a number of chemical plants, and as you all know, that if you dilute the catalysts and the reactants and the reaction is slowed down. So if you drink while you eat, what you're doing is you're inhibiting the ability to protect yourself from some of these possible pathogens. And so that we eat in our food or we put in our mouths. So eating and I mean drinking while you're eating is from a theoretical point is that. So if I know I'm sick, or if I know I have a little stomach upset, if I go somewhere and I'm out somewhere and there's something to drink with it, I purposely know in my mind that, hey, this is the mechanism. So I say, I'm not going to drink anything when I eat because I want to give my body the best chance to protect itself against any pathogens. The next little protection that we have in the GI tract against problems with leaky gut is motility. Motility, as you know, if you have a river that is flowing, as long as it's flowing well, the water is pretty clean, pretty pure. But once you get a stagnant river for whatever reason, like if you get if there's a tree that falls in the river, or a mudslide and all the mud blocks the river and the water becomes stagnant for some reason and can't get through as fast and becomes a little pool, that you get sort of all sorts of things growing in there and it causes problems. Well, the same thing happens in the GI tract. If you don't have good motility, then you have a problem in that the pathogens can grow because it's warm, it's got a lot of nutrients, and it's got a lot of water. And so you get a lot of problems with people that have obstructions in the GI tract. They have or diverticular or other pockets that can lead to infections and breakdown of the gut barrier and leads to leaky gut, which causes problems. And then there's the gut-brain connection. So the mind, the brain can have direct effects upon the GI tract, direct neurologic and secondary immunologic endocrine effects. And they're specific to our talk today is the issue of leaky gut. This is where you can get a breakdown in one or more of these above defenses, which leads to the breakdown of the last barrier to the GI alimentary system, the gut wall, with the signs and symptoms. The wall is the mucosal surface of the GI tract and the intestinal epithelial cells. So any trauma, these pesticides that I talked about, the autoimmune diseases, infections can lead to leaky gut, the breakdown of the wall. So things that we should definitely avoid for leaky gut are things like alcohol, these pesticides like Roundup. Many of you guys have heard of that. It didn't exist until about 30 years ago. This particular pesticide is so bad that they have to wear hazmat uniforms whenever they deal with it at the chemical plants. And it's been shown to even cause cancer, and the residue of it is on many of the plants because they use it to kill the weeds around it. So the plants are designed to survive Roundup, but the weeds aren't. And so they spray it on these GMO plants. And so the plants survive, but the weeds are killed. But the problem is the residue of the Roundup is on the plants that we eat. And so they're finding this in some of the foods these days. And this, if it's in high enough concentrations, can cause things like neurologic problems, immunologic problems, even cancer. So high animal fat diets can lead to problems with leaky gut. So detergents or emulsifiers in foods and food additives and processed foods sugars and artificial sweeteners. In my field, the number one thing that we ask patients when they come in and they say, I have all this gas, I can't do anything about this gas. The first thing we ask them is, are you using any artificial sweeteners? The reason why is because artificial sweeteners are prebiotics. So prebiotics are the things that probiotics or the bacteria use to grow. So it's the sugars, and the bacteria, some bacteria like certain sugars. And it just so happens that artificial sweeteners promote the growth of bacteria that cause excessive gas. Also, tobacco causes leaky gut. Antibiotics, as you know, can destroy the microbiota or the microbiome, and that can lead to a breakdown of the normal symbiotic relationship. And the pathogenic bacteria come in and they can attack and break down the mucous membrane and the barrier between the gut and cause disruption of the tight junction directly or through toxins they produce. And then there's low gut biodiversity. So what we're finding now, the best way to build up your gut biodiversity. So if you have low biodiversity, just a decrease in the different types of microbiota or bacteria in your GI tract, you're more prone to have problems or diseases. And you do much better if you have a very diverse microbiota. So you build that up best by getting your probiotics from natural fruits and vegetables. So the best source of that, once again, would be local farmers or your own garden. But if you can't, then the organic produce at the store would be best. I would advise, if you wash it off, you wash it off with water or one of these like Castile soaps instead of things like Dawn detergent. But if you have no other choice and you have to do a soap, then just make sure you get all the detergent off, because if it gets in the GI tract, you might cause problems with the breakdown of the GI tract wall. So things that are helpful are stated of probiotics. The good prebiotics are actually good fruits and vegetables where there's natural sources of prebiotic materials, sugars that the good bacteria like to eat. There's certain amino acids that have been found to be helpful, like glutathione, glutamine and tryptophan, minerals like zinc. Of course, getting more fresh fruits and vegetables, as I stated. Vitamin D has been shown to be helpful. Pharmacologic agents, there's some research being done on MAP kinases. Exercise is helpful. 8 to 7 hours of sleep or rest, not only for the GI tract, but for your body overall. And as I stated, organic foods. So very interestingly, the GI tract is not just a digestive organ, but it's an organ that actually communicates with the rest of the body. And it's a symbiotic relationship where the GI tract keeps the other parts of the body healthy and the other parts of the body help keep the GI tract healthy. It's a major area of research right now. There's a lot more that we're going to learn over the next 10 to 20 years with a number of these microbiota or gut microbiome centers being open all over the country, indeed the world, because there's such potential, and that we can treat things like depression, we can treat things like weight management with our knowledge of the gut microbiome. We can treat certain diseases that are plaguing us, such as GI diseases like Clostridium difficile. Wouldn't it be interesting to treat multiple sclerosis or other diseases through what we can do through the gut microbiome? These are the possibilities that lie ahead of us. Leaky gut has opened the door in many ways to this research, in that trying to understand it and what's causing it from things that the things in our environment, such as pesticides and genetically modified foods and detergents that seem to cause disruption of the gut wall to lead to leaky gut, have led us to understand how other diseases in our body can be affected by these gut microbes and how we can make those diseases better. So with that, I think what time is it? I guess that's what I'd like to present today. I think that at another time I can give you a little bit more descriptive, some research articles and some pictures that would describe this a little bit better with the next presentation. With that, I'll conclude at this time. Thank you.
Okay, Thank you so much, Dr. Sweatt. I've got a question. And for anybody else, if you do have any question, we do have a few minutes that we could take some questions. But I have a question. So we talk about the gut and how we're supposed to eat. Say you go out for dinner and then you want to have like dessert. What is the time frame should you have dessert in having your meal?
Yeah, so as far as dessert goes, I would say right then, right when you have the meal. Some people want to have it later on, but the idea is to complete the meal, which would include the dessert at that time, so you could have more time for this fasting or this time for autophagy where your body has the chance to repair itself. So are you saying that, was your question whether you should eat it right then or
yes,
early?
yes, should it just like you finish eating and then you just go straight into dessert? And
Yeah, just go straight to it. And the best time, I think, it depends on what you want to do for weight management as well. So I tell people if you're trying to do a better job of, say, weight management, that you would want to eat your dessert, preferably like at lunch instead of dinner. So you get the calories in. The reason why is your metabolic rate, I tell my patients this all the time, your metabolic rate is higher in the morning. So without even having to exercise, you're burning calories just sitting there. But as the day goes on, your metabolic rate slows down. So we know now that the later you eat, the more pounds you put on. So a dessert would be better at lunchtime rather than dinner. But nonetheless, I would eat it right then. I wouldn't eat dinner and then wait an hour or two and then eat dessert. Because of yeah.
Okay,
for those two reasons, one for management of weight and also because it's better to get the calories done earlier in the day if you can.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else who have any more questions that you would like to ask, please? You can just unmute and say.
I have a question, two questions actually. I'm hoping I can remember them. First, I just want to say this was excellent. I am a trained medical missionary and I've heard everything you said with spirit of prophecy quotes, but God allowed you to say everything succinctly and just specifically, like right to the point. Don't waste any words. And I really appreciate that. And normally, as I said in the chat, normally I'm a visual learner. I need to be able to hear everything you're saying clearly, and I need to see it. But today, without slides, I followed you exactly, and I could hear everything you said. So I just praise God for that. Matter of fact, this is the Zoom I'm going to share with family that I'm trying to get little bit by little bit to be more healthy, because the way you explained it, you touched on so many points, even especially with the artificial sugars. And so I'm looking forward to Sister Natasha posting the replay so I can share this with anyone, not just with the Adventists, with anyone. It's very clear. And that's why this health message is the entering wedge, because now you can present the word and show them Jesus. So I just wanted to say that, to God be the glory. But my question was two things. Lord, help me remember. One was, you mentioned, I'm always unclear on how to clean food if you are not able to grow it, or if you're eating something that you haven't grown, that happens not to be organic. And I am trying to buy organic / non-GMO more often than not. But the times when I cannot, those produce items, the best way to clean them, to get off the glycophosphate, I think I'm pronouncing that right, glycophosphate, the Roundup that may be used, is the best way. I mean, I've seen vinegar and water. I've seen, when you Google, you see vinegar and water, and you see baking soda and water. And I heard you say Castile soap. That's my first question.
Yeah, so anything where you can get the water, a lot of water on it, of course, as a professor of mine in medical school said, the solution to pollution is dilution. So get as much water as possible. If you really are suspicious, like if it's one of the dirty dozen, the peaches, the strawberries, the spinach, things like that that we know have a lot of contaminants on them, pesticides, then those, it'd be submerge them in water if you can do that, and then let them soak for a little while. Castile soap has been shown not to be detrimental to the GI tract. If you want to try vinegar, I don't know how well of a detergent that is. It definitely will kill pathogens. So if there's pathogens that are on it, the vinegar definitely will kill it because it's acidic. But the Castile soap has been shown to be beneficial if you want to use that. There are other products at the stores that you can use. There's a little veggie wash detergents that they sell in many of the health food stores like Whole Foods or Central Market, places like that. And you can try those as well.
So that dilution, excuse me, not the dilution, that cleaning that you're saying, because that's what I'm not clear on, whether the cleaning items are just taking off the dirt and the germs, or is it sloughing off the glycophosphate? That's what I wanted to know.
It's removing some of the glycophosphate. I don't think you can remove all of it. So that's why you want to buy organic if possible, because of that.
And so that brings me to my second question. I was not clear on whether organic farming, because they use pesticides, but I just wanted to know if you were aware if organic farmers, the pesticides, I guess they use are not detrimental or food grade, or maybe I'm not sure. I understand they're organic pesticides and I'm confused about their safety.
Well, the organic pesticides are supposed to be safe. I mean, they're supposed to be reviewed by, I forget the governmental agency that's supposed to review those, but they're supposed to make sure that those are not harmful to humans. So organically grown foods, if they're certified organic, they're supposed to be grown with, if they use any pesticides at all, most people don't, but if they use some, like you say, it's called certified organic, and those are biodegradable and not supposed to be harmful to humans.
Okay. And so when you see, if we should drink tea, because I understand that if you drink tea, if you don't add sugar to it, then it's kind of equivalent to water. But once you add a sweetener, then it becomes food. And so you have to consider the time frame between you eating and drinking it. What is your thought on that? Because I saw someone in the chat ask, after your second meal, can you drink tea? And so my question was not just the tea. I'm confused whether you should put any sweetener in it, even if it's honey or agave or whatever. What's your thought there?
Well, so the benefit that we're finding out now, this life benefit that happens from the fasting, is based on this research that's going on now in aging, and it's based on these longevity genes. There's about 15 of them. 7 of them are like sirtuins, and there's AMPAC, and then there's mTOR. So mTOR is based only on amino acids. So that particular part of the longevity genes is only based on if you eat something with amino acids in it. But the other ones, AMPAC and mTOR and the sirtuins, sense the energy level in the body. So how much sugar. So I think there's a little bit of debate on that. There's the leading expert in the field right now that's looking at longevity genes is a guy named David Sinclair, and he has a little bit of yogurt or a little bit of tea, like we were talking about, and they get a number of questions just like this. So I think if you limit it as much as possible, that'd be best. That would be good, but even better or best would be to just use water and avoid anything that may have calories in it. So if you're going to do tea, I would do tea without the sugar if possible.
Okay. And I just want to thank you. This, I promise, is my last question. I'll wait until you come again, because I know Sister Natasha is going to have you back again if I have to keep asking her over and over again. My last question. In trying to grow my own food, obviously I'm using organic soil. And I see that we have to use, I'm learning to grow because I'm not in the country yet, but prayerfully I will be. And we have to use these fertilizers. When I read the ingredients of the organic fertilizers, I see animal products. And so my fear is that I'm getting some of the glycophosphate and all the antibiotics, et cetera, that they give the animals in my fertilizer and therefore in my crops. So for example, and again, if you read the back of the organic fertilizer, it'll say bone meal, fish meal, chicken manure. And I'm like, wait a minute, should I be using these? That's my last question. Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience.
No problem. Yeah, I think that's a valid concern. I think you just have to shop for better organic fertilizers, what you're going to have to do. If you need to, you could even get it shipped to you, that it might be better. The problem with the bone meal, anything with animal products in it is you don't know exactly what those animals have been fed and what might be in the you know, decomposing part of their bodies. So a number of animals these days are fed a number of things that they shouldn't be fed, like other animals, and they weren't designed to eat those things, or they're fed neurologic tissue from those animals that may be contaminated. So I would just have to search for a better one. But of course, one of the best ways to do that, which is what I try to do here at my house, is anything like if I'm growing plants out here and part of some of them die or whatever, or at the end of the season, and I just take them and I throw them in a pile of dirt and make my own compost pile. A number of organic farmers, what they do is they take those compost piles that they create from their own farms, and then they put that back on top of the soil. Soil likes to have something on top of it, as you probably know, and your own compost to put on top of it would be great. But I would just go to some local places, soil places in your area, and ask them how they make their compost. And hopefully there's somebody who makes organic compost in the right way, which would be just taking organically grown plants, the leftover parts of them, and compost those in soil without any other contaminants in it. And that would be the best compost you could get.
Thank you. I do compost, but until it breaks down, you have to use something. So right now I have the worm castings, and I think I'm not using I didn't buy the one with chicken manure, but seemed like all of them had fish meal or bone meal or blood meal, and absolutely all of them had feather meal, which I'll have to Google what that is, but feather meal, bone meal, fish meal, and blood meal, all of them had. I couldn't get the one that had chicken manure. I just couldn't do that one.
You know, I think the best thing to do would be to try to get a organic plant-based compost. But if I knew, like I know people here in my area that are local farmers, if I know that they're feeding their farm animals, you know, organic material, they're not giving them pellets or protein that they're buying from the feed store, all those kind of things. But it's like range-fed cows, and that's all they're eating is the grass that's normally out there, and they're not getting any other type of supplements, then I wouldn't be totally opposed to using, you know, that particular animal manure if I knew those animals were being treated well, because the chance if you're getting some glycophosphate or some type of prion disease in the soil or some other problem like that is pretty low. But like I said, once again, the best compost I think would be just to have organic plant matter that's left over from the past season that's been composted.
Thank you.
Okay.
Brother,
All right, go ahead.
Dr. Sweatt, my question is, I've heard it said, leaky gut, leaky brain. Is the research showing that that's automatically the case, or only in some people? Do you have any insights on that?
Yeah, so leaky gut, leaky brain is pretty true. It's not in all people because everybody's different. So if you have, let's take the issue of depression. So not everybody who has depression is due to leaky gut, right? Not everybody that has leaky gut has depression. So some people that have leaky gut send a signal to their brain that increases some type of peptide or hormone or or something. We don't know exactly yet. We just know that if you have patients that have depression or anxiety and you give them lactobacillus and bifidus in this one study that I was quoting, that their depression and anxiety gets better. So the question is why? And this is why major institutions, like I was just reading about UCLA opening up a whole new center on the study of the microbiome for this very reason. So instead of giving people Prozac and Zoloft and Zyrtec and Trazodone for all their mood disorders, we're going to start giving them probiotics instead, or modulating their system to send the right signals to their brains. So some people genetically are more predisposed to depression and to anxiety, and those people probably have a leaky gut that easily leads to the leaky brain or the depression, anxiety in that one example. So it depends on our genetic predisposition to whatever the leaky brain manifestation might be. But some of us can get hit all the day long with these bad signals from the GI tract, and we don't get depression, right? We don't get the manifestation of the leaky brain. It depends on the organism, which is why in our society right now, I believe a lot of people that are having this sensitivity to grains, to wheat and to barley and things like that, it affects them, but it doesn't affect the majority of us. And that's why a number of people have been writing this off. Even in my field, leaky gut was something that we sort of said, oh, that's just for the naturopath people. But it's becoming so prevalent now that we can't ignore it anymore, because people are getting better by avoiding certain things that cause a leaky gut in their case, which in that case is grains that are just bothering them. And now we're seeing with research that yes, it does cause a problem.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Is there anybody else with one more question? We have 2 minutes before 10. Is there anybody else who have one more question?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I wanted to find out if there was the link between the leaky gut and the specific autoimmune diseases.
Yeah, there have been a number of studies showing that there is a link between leaky gut and some autoimmune diseases. And so I have a friend who runs a lifestyle center in Northern California, just out of Sacramento. And she's had tremendous success by approaching these autoimmune diseases from that standpoint, from that paradigm. And that she tries to find the things that people are sensitive to. And everybody's different. Some people, they're sensitive to grains. Some people, they're sensitive to nuts. Some people, they're sensitive to a number of different things. Some people, they might be getting too much exposure to pesticides or detergents. And if they just stop washing their food in Dawn detergent soap and switch to Castile soap, they would feel much better. Or it could be a number of things. But based on that paradigm, she's had success with a number of autoimmune type diseases, such as rheumatoid arthritis and some people with thyroid disorders, things like that, we know are based on an autoimmune disease. So using that paradigm, people are having success treating those diseases, trying to avoid things that cause the leaky gut.
Thank you.
And I have one more question before we close. So you mentioned about the different illnesses that children have, like Down syndrome or, those type of issues. Does that mean then probably during pregnancy, the mother maybe wasn't eating correctly? Why some children are born with this? Because I once heard a doctor said that half of the time when a child is born with an issue with the heart, blood issue, most time it starts during pregnancy. The mother wasn't taking proper care of herself in how she eats and drink. and her thoughts and other stuff. And so this caused the illness. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think things that we do know are that we tell mothers right now that they can't eat fish more than once per month. And the reason why we tell mothers that is because of the contamination in fish is so severe now that every obstetrician tells a pregnant woman not to do that. There's so much mercury, lead, pesticides in these fish that it causes problems that is so well recognized in the medical literature that we have to tell, it's unethical for us to tell mothers not to do that. Now, could it be that other things are causing some of these disorders like leaky gut or bad nutrition? I think that's very possible just based on that example of fish and the lead and the mercury and the arsenic and all these cadmium and all these heavy metals that are in these fish. I think it's possible, yes, but because we can't put a finger on it, which is why all this research now is going into this, we'll be able to tell people that in the future, I think, based on the research that's going to be done soon.
Yes, because I also heard that in dealing with most of these issues, if you eat more organic stuff, more organic food stuff, it does help to, most of the time you get rid of these things. So it's really not a life sentence if even after the child is born with these disorders that the parents start to change the way they eat and that sort of thing.
Well, the food that we're eating is nothing like the food. Like there was a book in the 1980s, I believe, that was written. It's called Diet for a New America. And basically it was like the Sinclair Lewis, The Jungle Book for that time, right? It's the same thing. And what is showing that the food that we're eating is not the food that our parents ate, it's not the food that our grandparents or great-grandparents ate. Right? It's very different. So in the 1980s, they knew that the food that they were eating then was different than what their grandparents ate because chickens were taken from an egg to on your plate within 5 weeks. And so, but their grandparents or their great-grandparents, it took them, at least a few months, right, to get the chickens to grow and before you eat them. And so that book showed that the amount of fat in those chickens that they were eating in the 1980s was anywhere from 2 to 4 times as much as the fat that their grandparents were eating. So as we know from the Bible, the Bible says what? Don't eat the fat and don't eat the blood. And the reason why is we know that high animal fat diets lead to problems like cardiovascular disease, cancer, early death, metabolic syndrome, all those things, right? So the food that they were eating in the 80s is not the food that we're eating now. The reason why is because there's so many people in the world that they had to create a way to create more food, and they knew it. So that what they did was they created all these pesticides that'll kill all the bad weeds off and keep the bugs from eating the food so that there'd be more food for people to eat because there's so many more people. But they also created genetically modified foods. And what we know now is those genetically modified foods can cause problems, even though they're sort of downplaying it. But if you simply look, this is what I always tell people, if you simply look at the European Union, they do not allow genetically modified foods in their countries. And the question is why? And that's what people should really be asking themselves. Why do Europeans not allow those in there? And so animal studies, now that they haven't done the human study, but animal studies show that it causes increased inflammation. And in my mind, the number one problem in medicine today is inflammation. Inflammation causes arthritis, causes heart disease, strokes, heart attacks, cancer, everything is related to inflammation, right? So if that food is increasing the inflammatory process in the body, that's a problem, and that's going to lead to problems in the human body, which is why the Europeans don't allow that in their country. So we have a lot of things going on in the food supply that our parents and our grandparents didn't have to deal with. They didn't have to deal with glyphosate or these other things. So we have to be cognizant of that and avoid those things as we are able to, which for us gets back to what we've been told a long time ago, and that's to have a piece of land and grow food for ourselves. But
yes.
As I try to tell my patients here, please start a garden. And one of the reasons, this is a side reason, but I think it's a good reason, that is that everybody in our community will be able to share with each other. We'll be able to barter. I can trade a tomato for a potato or something, so.
Yes,
So
yes.
it'll help everyone.
Mhm. Okay, well, I want to say thank you so much. This is a very interesting lesson, and let us try to begin to take care of ourselves by the way we eat and the way we drink. At this moment, we're going to bow our heads in prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for allowing Dr. Sweatt to remind us how you taught us how to eat and how to drink. May we, Heavenly Father, begin at this moment today to start making those changes in our lives so that we can live more healthier and that we won't have these illnesses and these diseases. And if we do, we can basically cure ourselves by the foods we eat. I thank you. I wanted to ask that you bless us on this special Sabbath and help us to live for you onwards. And as we go, may we take these informations with us and may we let them be a part of our daily lives. Thank you for Dr. Sweatt. Continue to bless him and provide for him so that he can always be around to remind us, to teach us how we are to take care of ourselves. Thank you, Lord. In your name we pray. Amen and amen. Okay, I thank you all. Sister Natasha, do you have any closing words?
Thank you again, Dr. Sweatt. This has been most enlightening and just humbling to see that Lord, in his care and love, gave us this knowledge through the pen of inspiration, and science is just now catching up with what we have known for over 100 years. So we look forward to having you back again in the future, and thank you everyone for attending, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care, everyone. Happy Sabbath.